Hello, Rebels. Welcome to The Base, the place where we try and figure out what's going wrong with California and how to put it right. And we are so excited about our guest today because one of the things that we want to do on the show is actually give a platform to the real rebels, people who really are standing up and fighting for the kind of changes that we want to see and the kind of things we talk about on this show. And this is someone who's really been doing it. Jonathan Zachreson. He is the founder of Reopen California Schools, whose name gives you a clue about what he's been working on. Jonathan, fantastic to see you.
Thank you. It's good to see you as well.
I'm just so excited that you could join us. And I want to hear all about how you got going, how it's going now, your thoughts about the future. So let's start at the beginning. Tell the story of how you got involved in this issue of schools and what's been going on with the schools and started your organization. Just start at the beginning, if you would.
Yeah. So like probably many parents at the time, I was clueless. I was
Which time? Let's just go back to when we're talking.
Sorry. Yeah. So right around pre-COVID.
Okay.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. I was, I really didn't pay attention. I now describe myself as a low information voter, right. Although at the time I thought I was, above average. I didn't spend all my time researching stuff, right. Really just read headlines, went to my Google News feed, and that was about it. I didn't know who my representatives were. I knew who the governor was. I knew who the president was. I couldn't tell you who my school board members were. Right. Which now I've learned is incredibly important. So like I said, I didn't know very much. Schools shut down because of the Newsom's orders for 3 weeks initially. And I was upset. I didn't think it was the right move.
That was last March, wasn't it?
Yeah, that was March of 2020. Yes. Yeah, March of 2020. I didn't really think it was the right move, but, I was dealing with it for those 3 weeks with the expectation that after those 3 weeks, schools were going to open. And, I think sometime in the middle or toward the end of those 3 weeks.
So you're a parent, and just to sort of set it up for us, so you have kids in school, what sort of roughly, what kind of school?
Yeah, so I have at the time I had a daughter in 8th grade, a son in 10th grade, junior. Oh gosh, man, now we're going really far back. I'm mixing things up here. So no, actually they were in 7th grade, 10th grade, and then a foster child in 10th grade.
Right. Okay.
Yeah. We've been doing this way too long. That's for sure. So you
said you were skeptical about the initial 3 week shutdown.
Mm-hmm. Yep. And then when we got that notice, that schools was going to be shut down for another month or so, I was really frustrated. And my initial reaction was, we got to fire everyone on the school board, everybody. That was my reaction. But I didn't know anything about the school board. So I started getting really involved locally at that point, started talking to, anyone I could talk to. I talked to our county board of education president. I talked to, our school board president at the high school. I tried getting information from the K through 8. And so how it works in our area too, just for your listeners, the K through 8 is one district, and then the high school is a separate district. So
whereabouts in the state are you?
I'm in Roseville, California, in Placer County.
Placer County. Okay. So
Kevin Kiley land.
Yeah. Is it?
Yes.
Okay. And I'm just interested. So already, but like it sounds like you pretty quickly started digging into the kind of bureaucracy around this, like who's making these decisions. Because you said you're calling the school board. That's quite so. I'm just really interested in that, like how you went from someone who had no clue about the school board and what it did and who it was, to you saying like within that kind of early, almost the first month or so, you're now calling school board members and presidents. Is that right?
Yep. Get involved in our county supervisors, just reaching out to anybody and everybody that represented me. I reached out to Kevin Kiley's office. I reached my senator's office. And, for the most part, when I was talking to the Board of Supervisors, to the Placer County Board of Education, and to the local school boards, everyone was pointing the finger in different directions. Right? They're saying, oh, this person sets the rules. This person sets the rules. Oh, it's CDPH. Oh, it's the governor. So I kind of got the runaround for about a month or so. By mid-May, I realized it was the governor's office that was really directing a lot of this. So that's when I realized, I went from just local issues and fighting things locally to then how do we address this on a state level. Around this time, I attended a Reopen California rally at the Capitol. First time attending something like that. I'd seen it on Facebook. And I should also mention, prior to this, I described myself, I would say that I was a social media hermit. I rarely I was rarely on Facebook. I didn't open the Twitter until June of 2020.
The Twitter.
Yeah. So I didn't know any of this, right?
Were you particularly political, interested? I mean, had you followed politics particularly?
Not really. I voted every election, but I didn't pay close attention. I watched news from time to time, see headlines, but I didn't spend as much time, definitely not as much as my free time as I do now. Looking at this and seeing what's going on. I digested probably weeks later, or just like I said, whatever I was told from a headline that would pop up on my newsfeed.
So you went to this rally in Sacramento, which was the Reopen California rally.
Yep. And after I attended that's where I learned about Recall Newsom. It was just before they were going to go live with signatures. So I was interested in that because I was upset with what Newsom was doing and shutting down schools. I also wanted to mimic it. I said, hey, I was naive at the time. I thought, what if we hold a rally like this one that we had? And this was, I think, Memorial Day weekend. What if we hold this rally for opening schools? And so I scheduled it for sometime in June. I started connecting with a few other folks. There was another Facebook group, Let Them Play. Not the Let Them Play that we hear about today. It was the original Let Them Play that actually has since closed down. They had about 14,000 members at the time. And so a lot of, as you can imagine, sports were shut down, and a lot of parents and athletes were really upset that that was shut, and they're trying to get the kids to be able to play again. So by using a couple other Reopen California Facebook groups, I started promoting this rally that I was going to hold at the Capitol in July. And that was why I created the group. I created the group simply for the purpose of holding this rally. That was it. I was thinking, we're going to hold this rally. We're going to have a big rally, and maybe we'll make an impact, and then schools will open in the fall. Right. That was the intent of the action that I took. Sadly, that is not what happened.
I don't think at the time anybody thought these lockdowns were going to continue. Everybody still believed it was going to be temporary.
Yeah. And I remember having a conversation with the principal of my son's school, and I can't remember exactly when this was. Maybe it was May at this time. And she was saying, oh, no, things will be back to normal in the fall. And I'm thinking, no, you don't know. No. Like, that's not what's going to happen. That's not what I see happening. I was starting to awaken to what was going on. And, I didn't think it was going to, but cases continue to fall kind of in the early part of the summer. And it looked like, Newsom was saying in July, or right before that Thursday or Friday when he shut schools down, he was saying local control, local control, local control. And our school boards, both, here we have very friendly school boards that are, parents and, are representative of the parents for the most part, or at the time over the most part, they're definitely now. They were going to open schools pretty much. I would say, I think the only mitigation factor they're going to probably do is to put hand sanitizer in a few, places and have masking. That was pretty much what they were going to do. Not too substantial changes. But then right before, like I said, then, so we had I think a board meeting was Thursday, and Newsom made that announcement on Friday. So
just go back to the rally. You're telling us how you were focused on just having the rally.
Oh yeah. So it's focused on having the rally. And that was scheduled for about the week after Newsom shut down schools. So I was starting to feel a little bit good. I was going through with the rally thinking everything was going to be open for me and maybe some other areas, and I was going to try to help those folks out. But obviously my kids were going to be able to go back to school. We had about a little under 1,000 people at the Capitol. So by that measure, I felt like it was successful. We partnered with Reopen California Schools. The Freedom Angels at the time had a following as well, and they had something the same day. So we kind of leveraged a similar audience. So we had, I'd say successful in that regard. But I didn't know anything about media. I thought, you hold a rally and it's on the I got my permit with California Highway Patrol, I figured, oh, yep, media is going to show up, right? You don't have to. You have to tell them. So we did have local Fox show up to that rally, and we had a few independent journalists show up. But the local Fox station did air just a tiny bit about it, but they didn't even save it on their website, so I couldn't share it later. It was a very small piece, and so I was frustrated by that avenue of it. But yeah, so we had a lot of people there, and it was on a Saturday, and it did absolutely nothing to reopen schools.
Okay.
And did you find that people were supportive of the cause, or was there a split between parents? What I found was people were split. People didn't want to take on teachers. They didn't want to take on administration. How about for you guys?
Yeah. So I was involved, obviously, earlier in the day next door until they stopped letting my posts go through. But yeah, next door parents, they were split. I'm in a community that I think generally wanted schools open. And a good example of that is in Roseville, when schools opened in the fall and we're going to open, it was like 75, 80% we're going to send their kids back to school, and only 20 to 25% we're going to go with the remote option. So a lot of parents wanted to go back. In the community where I'm at, they definitely wanted to. I think at a state level, the average was probably 60% parents wanted to go back, and 40% teachers wanted to go back at that time.
So basically, was it the lack of coverage, the media coverage of the demonstration that made you say, we got to do more, we've got to set up an organization here?
Yeah. So I created the Facebook group for the purpose of this rally, and since schools did not open, I just kept going with it. And I would say that many parents didn't really wake up to the reality of what was going to happen until the fall hit. Yeah. Right. We hear the news. And like I said, a lot of parents were probably still where I was. They weren't watching. They weren't seeing what was happening. And even administrators were probably assuming that school was going to open in the fall, shortly after. And even in areas where cases fell, some people were saying, hey, we're going to hold on to what's happening. Right. We're going to wait and see how the cases fall, which they did in middle of the fall. And then we're going to reopen. And that's when even more parents got involved. And so it kind of grew from that, right? Not much happened over the summer. And then when a lot of parents started waking up and realized what was happening, they kind of latched on and they started holding their own independent rallies all over the state. And that was, we had a lot of growth. And every time that we hold a rally, if anything, it may not have made a difference in regards of getting, our government to do anything, but it grew the group. And allowed us to then become what we are today.
And empowered people.
So what is that today? How would you describe it today?
I would say, we are a social media group, right? We have close to 15,000 members in our Facebook group. And I would say, and there's actually a lot of activity. So I look at the engagement and more than half of the members are engaged over a 7-day period. So there's a lot of people who are active in the group. On top of that, we have our Twitter handle at Reopen CI Schools, and I have I think 3,300 followers from them.
And tell us about the what you learned through doing this about how it really works. I was very interested that you said there was this conflict between the message from the governor, which is it's local control, and your sense that actually that was rubbish. It's all just BS. It's all the governor. Just dive into that a little bit more.
So that comes from, that really frustrated me to see the governor just unilaterally make these changes, because that's not how it's supposed to be done. And I think many people didn't see that. And he continues to this day to hold that emergency power to be able to do whatever he wants in the name of COVID precautions or any safety.
So what was the specific mechanism? Because funnily enough, it's interesting now you talk about it. It's sort of lost in time for me. I was just sort of enraged about the whole thing all the way through. But I'm actually trying to recall. I remember there's the first, what the specific steps he took. So there was the stay-at-home order, right? Going back in, that was the very first thing where everyone had to, everything was shut down. But then when you got to, August, September, the new school year, what was the mechanism? What was the specific thing? Did he say, if that was before we had, oh my gosh, so much.
Color coding.
I was going to say, was it the color coding? When did that come in?
Yeah, that was around that time. And I can't recall if he created the color code system prior to this, but on June, I believe it was July 17th of 2020, he put schools into that system.
Right.
And
okay, that's interesting. Right.
And that week, and what happened is, like I said, like on a Monday, he was saying local control. And these dates may not be exact, but Monday saying local control. On Tuesday, you had the LA Teachers Union saying, no way are we going to open in the fall. We're going to shut down. And basically, I think there was an agreement or something in LAUSD that says we're not going to do this. CTA started getting involved at that point.
That's the California Teachers
Association saying the same thing, that schools shouldn't be opening in the fall. And then all of a sudden, Newsom changed course because of the unions and the teacher unions.
Was it that when you say sudden? Was that week?
That was that week. That week of July 17th, I want to say, was a Friday. So all this happened within that week, or maybe just a little over a week. So it's pretty quick how that happened. And so he created the color code system that said schools would have to be closed if you were within, and I don't even remember, I think it was purple. I think if you're red, you could open. And then orange and yellow, obviously, you can open as well. So honestly, I've stopped paying attention to the color code system for a while.
Oh, he's finally got rid of it, but the whole thing was ridiculous. I mean, that's the most insane bureaucratic micromanagement I've ever seen. I mean, it was just so laughable.
It was arbitrary, completely arbitrary.
The point that you're making is that that I hadn't actually followed that sequence, which was he starts off saying, this is in July, local control, local decision about the schools. The unions weigh in, both at the LA level, the biggest district, and then the state level. And then immediately after that, he takes the power away from local areas, and the mechanism for taking the power away is the kind of color-coded system and the metrics that you have to meet. Is that right?
That's exactly it.
And I think it was to appease the unions.
Of course it was. I mean,
right.
The
parents don't appreciate that the unions were all over it. So starting in May and June, they're negotiating very aggressively and getting a lot of guidance from the CTA as to the types of things they should be demanding from their administrations, including no longer allowing the administration to give them performance reviews whatsoever. Because now it's crazy. Now I got to do remote learning and maybe some version of in-person. So how dare you, administration, want to evaluate my performance as a teacher? They changed the disability sort of regulations for teachers. So now if you had a fear of COVID, that was a qualifying disability in order to go on to a leave of absence. There was a lot of changes being made.
What did you just say?
The CTA advocated, and this got implemented in many, many jurisdictions, that if you had a fear of COVID, so I don't have COVID, I don't actually have what would normally be considered a qualifying disability, they changed the definition so that a fear of COVID was a qualifying disability, so that a teacher could take a leave, could take a leave of absence in the state and say that's a qualifying disability.
Is that the phrase? Is that the term?
Yes. It's a mental condition.
You're not making this up.
I'm not making it up.
People can check it.
People can check it. Yes. It is absolutely outrageous. So teachers were availing themselves of this.
Is a disability.
Correct.
Qualifying
under these MOUs, they changed the definition.
Outrageousness of that. What is so disgusting about that is how offensive that is to people with actual disabilities.
Or people who don't.
Like, what are you talking about?
And everybody was scared of COVID. That doesn't matter.
Or whether you're not, but like, how can you possibly, put that in with people who genuinely have disabilities that we should care for and help and enable to participate in society, all the kind of important things we need to do for people with real disabilities. And these fucking teachers put fear of COVID into, it's just so offensive.
It is offensive. They got away with a lot, and parents didn't even notice. They weren't looking at what was going on.
Yeah. And I'd say even a lot of teachers don't even know what's going on with their unions. These union reps are political machines.
Fair point. It's not just blanket it's the unions.
Yeah. Exactly. And there are definitely some teachers who are involved in running those, but they definitely don't represent, especially depending on the area, they don't represent a lot of the teachers. In fact, I think in my area, the teachers are probably rather upset with what CTA is doing.
Do they have to be members, by the way?
You can opt out. You can opt out. So that's a new rule, but a lot of teachers don't know that. I think in 2018, there was a Supreme Court ruled that you can't force public service employees to be part of their union.
Oh, this was Janus, wasn't it? Collecting,
Yes.
collecting dues, wasn't it? You can't force them to collect. Yeah, exactly.
Yep. So, but not many teachers even are aware of this. And a lot of schools, and again, there could probably be a whole conversation on just the power of the unions on other things in politics. But what I hear is that they use scare tactics and bullying to keep teachers in the union. So, I was talking with a teacher who left his union, and he was told, and he was trying to promote other teachers to leave the union. And he was told, don't ever expect to get a job outside the district. If you apply, you're not going to get a recommendation. Jeez. Don't ever expect to get a promotion in administration. And he's pretty much stuck with teaching in that district, in that job at that position, because of his political action and trying to get people out of the union.
Absolute bullying. I mean, that is outrageous. I mean, that must be, but I don't know. Is it illegal?
No. It should be. It should be. I think there should be. We should make that illegal. Bullying and intimidation should be the next step, as well as mandatory. You have to opt into the union as opposed to automatically opting in. So
I want to get into some of those things because they look like really. Seems to me like you've had a really rapid and deep education in how things work or don't work in California. I just want to, before doing that, just get to sort of up to date in terms of the organization and your focus. So you've created this group, grassroots membership, doing really well. Finally the schools are going to open, right? They really are. Where does that leave you're called Reopen California Schools? Do you say, well, we've achieved our goals, we're going to pack up and go home? How do you see the future?
No, we're not going to pack up and go home. And schools really aren't going to be open. We don't see schools opening normally in the fall. And that was really what we wanted last year. So we're trying to get that to open now. And we're hearing about mask mandates continue to happen. As far as we know, the same mitigations that were in place last year, namely the mandatory quarantines for close contacts, are still going to be there. And in many districts, they still employ surveillance testing. Like LAUSD just came out yesterday. I think they're voting today, actually, right? So I think they're voting today on the plan, which would test, I think it's teachers every 2 weeks. And I believe students may be part of this as well, maybe over a shorter time frame, but they're going to test teachers every 2 weeks, even if you've had the vaccine. They're still going to be doing. Exactly. Well. I
mean, I know there's I know literally what, they say, because, there's a sort of chance of transmission, even though the CDC has now said basically there isn't. That's why the CDC recommended, change their guidance. You don't have to wear a mask because we're really not worried about transmission from fully vaccinated people, etc. So what are they basing it on? Because the CDC guidance is very clear now that actually, if you're fully vaccinated, you're not, we don't need to worry about the transmission risk.
You kind of wonder what is going on. Is it COVID theater? Some of it was in the beginning, but as a lot of that's starting to go away, it's probably just corruption. My understanding is that the superintendent Buettner, he's on his way out, but he has ties to the company, brand new company that was created that has the contract for the testing.
No,
Summer Bio. Yep. And so really,
he's been a disgrace, by the way. So someone I know pretty well was a fan of his and said, he's a good guy. When he was appointed, is he appointed? They're not elected, are they? I think he was appointed.
The board is elected, and then they hire the superintendent. Yep.
Right. Good. He's good news. He's for school choice, whatever. He's a good thing. He's been a complete disaster in that role. Totally caved to the unions with everything they wanted. And now you're telling me that he is personally going to benefit from a testing regime that goes on when it's not necessary.
And I don't
in the months ahead.
Yeah, and I don't have evidence that he has a direct financial interest, but it is his close friend who supported him in the past financially for his. Who is that? Do you have a name? I do not have the name. I do not recall the name, but the company I believe is Summer Bio. They're based out of San Francisco, actually, and that's where it was. There's no need to test. Supposedly, they had the lowest price, but that's one thing. Fine, you could select them. But now he's forcing testing when it's not necessary. So that's where we are today. When they opened up in March, or came up with that agreement in March for LAUSD, and they had this testing regimen, they had these limits. They said, okay, if we're in the purple tier, we're going to test every 2 weeks. Every student's going to be tested before they go back. And then for the orange tier, we're going to test, only teachers every so often, and we're not going to have to test students. Well, they continued with the maximum number of testing regimen, even after they fell into the orange tier. And they continue
I
to
want to know how much we spend on COVID testing in California, because I don't buy it that any of these were the
ridiculous.
Lowest. These were no bid contracts. It. I mean, these fall within COVID. They would fall within the emergency order. These for sure were no bid contracts, and no chance that they gave it to the lowest bidder.
Yeah.
This is political favors.
Summer Bio is the LAUSD. Yeah, Summer Bio is LAUSD's contract. If you want to take a look, though, what Newsom's failed state lab, Valencia Labs, just look at some of the reporting that CBS reporter Julie Watts, investigative journalist, and some of the stuff that she's kind of uncovered in regards to the Valencia State Lab. And CDPH still hasn't gotten back to her, as far as I know, on the some of the problems that were going on there. There was problems where people were sleep on the job, mixing up tests. Their testing positivity rate was much higher than the state average. So many issues that were going on with that state lab. They're not even getting anywhere near the volume that they're contracted for. So instead of, again, making $20 a test or what it might be, the state's paying over $100 a test because they're, a fifth of the volume that they said. And that's really why, we were thinking that they were pushing testing with Let Them Play and returning to schools, because the state had this contract for a minimum number of tests. We were nowhere near it, and they needed an excuse to use them. So let's use schools.
It's so corrupt. And it really highlights this, allowing everything to become about case counts, allows this, this corruption and a lot of it theater to continue, because if you think about it, it's actually extraordinarily anti-vax to still test people for COVID after they've received the vaccine. We should be paying attention to hospitalizations and deaths. And you're right, Steve. It's a scandal. It's terrible.
Right. I'm just looking. I mean, I was, I don't believe I'd never heard this before. So you're right. This is from CBS Los Angeles. Gold's COVID-19 testing lab for LAUSD students linked to Superintendent Austin Putin. Exactly as you say. Summer summer as in the season. Bio, one word, but if people want to look it up, it is really, I hadn't heard this before. And
I hadn't either. I'm not shocked. I don't know why we're shocked.
I know we constantly do this, don't we, on the show, Chris? And we say, it's unbelievable. And of course it's not. It's just all too believable.
It's like somewhere, and there's like something in me that's naive that people in politics want to do good. And so every time when you're confronted with this
I'm
corruption,
really going to go on the
upsetting.
warpath against this Austin Buettner. I really want to. I just think he's an absolute disgrace. Let's really go for him. Right.
Just wait till you find out what the union's doing.
No, but he's supposed to be running the schools on behalf of the parents.
That's right.
Yeah, he is. But really, he's been running on behalf of the unions.
It's really.
So.
All right. So now what? So you think schools are going to open? I call sort of nonsense, because that was a misleading headline. That was just of schools reporting data. 90% or so said that they were going to open. And you only had to open one school in the district to be able to say your district was opening schools. And I think we're going to have a lot of machinations in the fall with the vaccines and masking. And
that was a whole other fiasco with, San Francisco in particular, that opened for one day to try to get their $12 million. Thankfully, because I think Newsom has even been burned by the unions. I think he was trying to give them what they wanted and say, hey, I'll do this for you. You do this for me. Well, they didn't return their favor to him. And so I think he's mad. And so he's not really giving them an ounce from the legislative side on opening. So they don't have a choice. They're going to have to open in the fall for anybody who wants it. And that's because of this pressure that we've applied. But what he could still do, he could put mitigations in place. Like I said, he can mandate, like they're doing now, everybody's going to mask up, even teachers who've been vaccinated, even students who've been vaccinated, every student. The only exception is outside, according to the rules. But as we see in LA, they're continuing to mask outside. right?
So
Even though it's not even,
let's just talk
Masks
about
are
that
a
for a second.
religious talisman now.
They are, like I said at one point on Twitter, for the left, masks are the new MAGA hat. That's what it is. Like it's just this totally political symbol. Let's just sort of dig into that a bit, though. To people who might say, well, you know what? As long as the schools are open, who cares? It's crazy that they have to wear masks. It's always been crazy that they have to wear masks. We know that masks, all the, the WHO, one after another, there's a report saying that and Fauci said it right at the beginning, the masks do not work unless they're proper N95 masks, in which case they do. But the cloth masks that everyone's been told to wear make basically no difference because it's the air. Let's not get into that. Yeah. Whatever. We know that it's rubbish. However, it's become this kind of symbolic thing. What do you say to the argument that says, look, honestly, if that's fine, let them have their fucking masks, as long as they open the schools and kids are learning, who cares about the masks?
And that was the approach we took when we opened schools initially. That's when my daughter's school opened November. They were back full time in November. And my son's school, same thing, full time since January. So what they had is we're like, okay, let's get the mask. But then once you start seeing what it's like wearing a mask all day, and I would say that the teachers hate the mask worse than the kids in many cases, but and especially when they see these kids having to wear, masks in PE. And what they did to accommodate that is in PE, they just basically said, we're not going to do any strenuous exercises. So instead of having kids run, they're just going to walk the lap because you can't run in a mask. So that's how they accommodate. So you're not getting the full education and the full experience that you need to because of it, having to wear the masks. Same thing with
and it teaches kids that they're vectors of disease. And nobody's studying the psychological harm. Where are all the studies on these little kids who have to walk around every day feeling like they might hurt someone? That's the signal you're sending when you say you still need to wear a mask. It's that you're diseased, that you can transmit something and you can hurt your friends. Right.
And it's really interesting because can I just sort of chime in there? Because I think it's interesting. I haven't seen that with our kids. And I suspect it's because, and they just kind of, they wear it, whatever. I suspect it's because we've, and I've been trying to indoctrinate, whatever. We always put two sides of every argument on politics and everything else. That's how my wife and I sort of, raised them. And we definitely don't try and push a particular point of view. But we have said, about the mask, we constantly talk about it. Like it doesn't really make a difference. And so it's interesting because they actually haven't absorbed that message that they're dangerous, the mask, it's just like it's all slightly ridiculous or whatever. But actually, when you have that message going out that it really is so dangerous and the masks are going to save your life, you're right, Kristen, that's how you end up traumatizing kids because they really believe it.
Yes. And I'd say the other part too is I think a lot of people use the mask as a crutch. There's probably much better things that you could be doing if your goal is to not spread COVID than to wear a mask, right? So people may, people wearing the masks and then you see them, get right in each other's faces. Well, if you're wearing a mask, it's not going to make a difference if you're right in each other's faces. So I think it gives people a false sense of security.
Well, the whole thing is so infuriating because I mean, I'm sorry, you got me going now on the whole thing. I mean, this isn't just a California thing, but like with the schools, for example, do you remember the CDC suddenly changed their guidance almost overnight, just saying, oh, well, you know what, that 6 foot thing, like the big reason that for not reopening the schools, a lot of the argument you heard was, well, and this is why the unions wanted more money, because they said, look, we have to do the 6 foot social distancing. That means we need more space. We have to spread the desks apart. You need to put it's really complicated to achieve 6 foot social distancing. We need more money to do that, whatever. Then they turn around for literally with nothing behind it, the CDC nationally, and say, well, actually, you know what? It's not 6 foot, it's 3 foot. Just that. And they said it's 3 foot. And the reason that they said 3 foot was because the Biden administration was getting all this incoming fire about, well, why aren't you doing more to reopen the schools? And they realized that the barrier was this 6 foot social distancing thing. So they suddenly changed it to 3 foot. There's a scientific basis either for the 3 foot or the 6 foot, because what we now know is that the whole social distancing thing was total BS, because actually as some of us were pointing out a year ago, it's not transmitted through droplets anyway. The 6 foot social distancing is all about droplets. That's typically the distance that a droplet can travel and fall to the ground or whatever. But it's actually aerosols, which are much further than. There was a study, I think it was March, April, I don't know when it was, but that was very clear that this virus is transmitted through aerosols, by the way, which get through all of these masks and can travel 30 feet. And can hang around in the air in an enclosed space for hours. Like there was some experiment that had them in the air, over 3 hours, and the concentration was just as high. In other words, the social distancing is a total irrelevance. What you actually need to focus on is ventilation. And you could have had all the schools open, totally safely, if you had proper ventilation. Same with restaurants, same with, open the window, put a fan in. That's the way to do, not the masks or the social distancing. The whole thing has been a complete joke from the start. And this is not, and people say, oh, well, science, sorry, I'm ranting. People say, oh, science, science changes and you've got to adapt to the science and you can't expect them to get it right at the beginning and blah, blah, blah. No, this was known a year ago. It's not like they've suddenly discovered about the aerosols.
No, yeah. No, and again, I think you touched on an important point. So there's actually some detail behind that 3 foot and what was going on. So fall, many schools didn't open, even though they could have, based off the color-coded system. And that was because of the strength of the unions. Well, parents started getting upset. That's when parents were like, hey, wait a minute. Our state rules say that we can open. Why is our district not opening? And that's when a lot more parents got involved. Mm-hmm. And in January 14th, there was pressure where, school parents were going to sue their own districts. Parents were going to start taking action, and they were getting a lot of pressure on the school board level. Well, January 14th, Newsom then comes out with that 6 foot rule mandating that 6 foot distancing in schools that shut down every school that was not open at that time to remain
January this year.
January 14th of 2021.
Yeah.
Right. So that's when we were even thinking here in Roseville that we're going to have to go back to hybrid. Now, he made an exception for if you were already open, you didn't have to follow this particular rule.
Oh, by the way, the private school that his kids were at.
Oh, yeah, exactly.
Which have been open since September.
Yeah, so the private school that his kids were at, my kids that were open, they could stay full time. But if you were already closed or hadn't been open yet, or you weren't open full time, you would have to stay in that hybrid model. So I got connected with some parents down in Southern California because we were thinking of suing. They ended up suing and successfully sued CDPH, and we got that initial ruling in.
What does that stand for?
California Department of Public Health.
Okay.
So basically what the ruling that they had against CDPH, and the judge just totally ripped CDPH apart on this, was the 6 foot distancing aspect of it. The fact that you taught, or that the high schoolers and middle schoolers were different than elementary because they had different sets of rules. Elementary could open where high school couldn't in many cases. So they got rid of those. And that's when CDPH changed their ruling in March 20th that effectively allowed every school district in the state of California to open at that time. Every school district could have fully opened at that time. That was right around the time that the CDC came out with their revised guidance on the 3 feet as well. I think that was on a Friday, and then CDPH updated. I think the ruling came out like on a Tuesday or Wednesday. CDC updated on a Friday, and then CDPH updated their guidance on Saturday. That 3 foot distancing, I think, was actually a CDC study out of Wisconsin that was done, I believe, in the spring, or it was either the spring or early fall of 2020, where they found that, hey, 3 feet was adequate. Now, the 3 feet, again, wasn't a magic number. It was just that was the distance used in the study, and they found no difference between 3 feet and 6 feet.
Yeah, but they could have done 1 feet and found no difference because it's not
exactly right.
fucking droplet.
I mean, yeah, right. It was just a measure.
I don't think people understand what aerosols mean.
No, yeah, exactly. I'm just saying, but that's where the 3 feet comes from.
Okay, so now what?
Good point. Yes.
So now what? We still have these same guidance, right? We still expect the quarantines. Technically, this guidance of 6 feet is, legally schools have to open full time, but there's not even a mechanism to allow it for some cases because they haven't opened. So we still have this guidance. We still have the mask mandate, and what our very next steps is legal action. So we've raised at that time we had over $40,000. There's 2 fundraisers. Eventually go to 1. And we're working with a group called Let Them Play that's really focused on the masks. Up here in Northern California, we started initially on the quarantines, testing, and also masks. So we're joining forces with this group. Same group. We're using the same law firm that successfully sued CDPH this last winter and early spring. And we're going to go after Newsom and CDPH if they continue with these guidelines. So we're expecting that. We're expecting nothing to change until September 1st. So things are in motion to start that legal action.
So let them play or let them breathe.
Sorry, did I let them breathe? I may have said let them play.
That's
sorry,
okay. Yeah.
I meant let them breathe. Let them breathe. So there's a lot of let them. Yeah, let them learn.
Okay.
Stop punishing
Let
them.
Grow. I really like this organization started by someone called Lenore Skenazy, Let Grow, I think, which is about kids being free to play and not being sort of helicoptered and micromanaged the whole time. Lots of, that's right, because it's whatever. We're out of time. I'm really sorry. I wanted to ask about the lessons you've learned about the way the system works. And that is a long conversation, and I'd love to have that another time. We've touched on it a little bit here with the unions and so on, but I think there's more to learn from you, Jonathan, on that. So let's make a date to come back and talk about that with you another time. Just the last point I wanted to check in with you on in terms of where we are now. How do you think any of this plays into politics, the recall? What's your sense of the politics of the parents who've got involved in your group?
I don't think the recall would have been successful if Newsom opened schools. He's changed his tune on schools because the recall succeeded, and the recall succeeded because he didn't open schools. So I really hope that his crimes don't go unpunished and that he stays. I don't want him to stay in office. Even though he's changed on this aspect, because as soon as if he wins the election, then he can do whatever the heck he wants to do after that.
But what about
he's going to shut the schools down again? We're going to go back in the fall under this emergency order. I guarantee you he's not going to relinquish his authority, and he's going to close those schools again the second we have a
except the schools that his kids go to. What about but the politics in terms of partisanship? I'm interested in that. Have you seen? Is this like are all your parents Republicans? No. Talk about that a little bit.
No, it's funny. Like I said, I vote differently now today for the last year than I probably voted for most of my life because of this issue. And so I would say we're nonpartisan. And a lot of parents early on who spoke up in favor of reopening schools were labeled as far right extremists. But really, no, that's not the case. And it was really seen at the media line, seen politicians line, seen the corruption that is just really awoken me to what's going on here. Everything's politics, and so much money is spent on politics. Especially, a lot of the money that goes for these unions aren't going just to negotiate their wages and conditions. It's going to the political arm, which funds candidates. And sadly, we have a supermajority in California of Democrats who control pretty much everything, and that's for most of the money. From the teachers unions goes to them, and it's not because they're doing anything about the kids. They don't care. I wouldn't say necessarily even about maybe Democrat versus Republican issues. They just want to maintain their power and make sure that the schools continue to have a monopoly on the school funds.
Yeah.
So true.
All right, Jonathan, fantastic. I really, really love talking to you. As I say, we'll come and do lots more on this with you another time. We'll have to leave it there for the moment.
But listeners, go to reopencaliforniaschools.com, right, Jonathan, to figure out how they can help.
Yeah, reopencaliforniaschools.com. From there, you can see our Facebook group, which is Reopen California Schools. And then also you can follow us on Twitter at ReopenCA Schools.
We will. I hope all of you listening will, because what you've done here is just fantastic. Exactly the kind of grassroots movement that we want to see and support, and it's all part of the change we want to bring about in this state. Jonathan, thank you so much for being with us, and please come back and join us for the next California Rebel Base.